Welcome to Fire Up Your Life with Tony Fitzgerald. If you've liked what you watched, please smash that subscribe button. Hi, welcome to our podcast.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
I know that you had to drive a little bit to get here, so I really appreciate you taking the time.
No problem. It's not a bad drive at all.
That's good. That's good. And you showed up early. So
yeah, I got here early. That's great.
That's always good. So I'm going to give you a minute. I'd like you to introduce yourself to our audience.
All right. Well, my name's Kelly Kowall, and I am the founder of My Warrior's Place, which is a 501c3 nonprofit. And it was started in honor of my son, who was killed in Afghanistan in September of 2009. And when I say it was founded in honor of, I should say he forced me to found this because he actually started coming to me in various ways and sent me out on this path to create the nonprofit. And I am a certified life coach and grief coach, as well as a business coach. And I'm also a certified fire walking instructor and glass walking instructor. So, yeah.
I did that at Tony Robbins. I did
you?
the fire walking at Tony Robbins.
Yeah.
Yes, that was an experience for sure.
It is. It's very exhilarating.
Yeah. Are you a veteran yourself, or?
No, I'm not. My father served in Korea, but I am not a veteran.
What did you do before this?
I actually was a headhunter for many, many years, and then got into a life and business coach, and was a sales trainer for many years as well.
Sales trainer? Mm-hmm. For what kind of companies?
Sales and marketing. Yeah.
Just for like commission type jobs, or like, was there an specific industry or anybody that was doing type of sales?
No, it was actually for some of the more famous sales trainers out there that hired sales trainers to go out and teach the masses. So,
Okay.
Yeah.
I understand. And you said, so you run a nonprofit, and it's designed to help veterans and public safety,
law enforcement, firefighters,
EMS.
Yes, active duty veterans and families of the fallen.
Gold Star.
Yes,
families,
Gold Star families.
Yeah. So when did you know you needed to do this? Because you mentioned it, and that your son came to you, and I'd really like to find out more about that.
Yeah. Well, actually, he started coming to me in various ways right after he was killed.
What happened?
He was actually out on a combat mission, and the driver swerved what he thought was an IED in the road and lost control of the vehicle. And it flipped several times, and he was in the turret, and it acted like a guillotine, so to speak. Yeah. And the doors blew off, and those inside were thrown out. The medic was killed as well. And the driver and the sergeant were both medically discharged due to their injuries. So it was pretty bad. Yeah. But it also saved a lot of lives, because they found out afterwards that where they thought the IEDs were actually closer than they had anticipated, and where the front the Humvee turned around, the IEDs were only 500 feet in front of it. So at the rate of speed that they were going,
they would have been
there would have been a lot more killed and injured. So
yeah. So this actually prevented
more deaths. Yeah.
And before we move on to talking about your son coming to you, you're a Gold Star.
I'm a Gold Star
family.
mother, yes.
And I don't know that everybody understands, that, but I know that is the terminology given to any family that has lost someone in the military.
Yes.
Is it during combat? Is it during?
No, just during their time of service. So it doesn't matter how they died. It doesn't matter whether they're due to a car accident, training accident, whether a health, cancer.
Sure.
It doesn't matter.
So if you die in service
While
to
you're in service, you
military.
are a Gold Star family. Yes.
Yeah.
The Gold Star actually started during the Civil War. They used to hang a banner with a blue star on it. And that signified, for each blue star you had on the banner, signified how many people that you had in service. And then they came up with when they died, they actually took a gold star, placed it over top the blue star. So if you ever see a Gold Star banner, you'll see a faint blue outline of the star.
Of them in the service.
Yeah, and so they call it a blue to gold ceremony, and where your blue star now turns to gold.
And that's actually a ceremony that's...
Yes, they actually do a blue to gold star.
Is that at Arlington? Do they do that?
No.
Or do they do that wherever you're...
Typically, they have a Blue Star Mothers organization, and typically the Blue Star Mothers are the ones that then do the blue to gold ceremony for the Gold Star Mothers. Yeah. A lot of times the Gold Star Mothers are Blue Star Mothers, and then they lose their loved one, and so then...
Yeah.
So...
Yeah. I know it's such a incredible sacrifice to give your life for your country in any capacity. And, there's no words for the loss. And we just, as Americans, as citizens, we just need to really respect and honor that and know that it's not just the soldier,
right,
or the police officer,
yes,
or the firefighter,
yes,
but it's the people they've left behind and impacted.
Right. And I would tell people always, don't be afraid to ask them.
Yeah.
Ask them about their loved one. Ask them to tell you a funny story, or, tell me something that your loved one did that was uniquely them. Because no matter whether it's a spouse or a child or a sibling, we love to talk about them because they're still part of our life. They're just not on earth anymore. They're not earthbound, but they're still a part of life. I'm still
Sure.
a mom. I have wonderful memories. And I love to talk about him just as I would if he were still alive.
Yeah. I lost a stepdaughter after helping raise her for 9 years, and she was hit by a drunk driver. And run over by the car behind that drunk driver, and walking across the street, and we lost her. She was such a ray of light, and so it's different circumstances, but it's not, they're never gone.
No.
It gets more distant.
Yeah, it ebbs and flows.
Yeah.
I think it gets a little easier to carry. So you're not letting it stop you from moving forward. Whereas I think when you first experience the loss,
there's no words.
There aren't any.
It's devastation.
Yeah. I never knew what a primal scream was until I heard it coming out of my own mouth as I fell to my knees. And then thank God your body knows how to breathe and the heart knows how to beat, because you're just kind of going through the motions. I mean, you're not even paying attention really to what's going on. You're so numb. But then you start coming out of the fog, and you start picking up the pieces, and some still struggle with that really hard. I mean, it's just, it's learning to carry the grief a little easier and not letting it pull you down.
Finding a healthy way to deal
yes, exactly.
with it. Yeah. And, the best way to do that is to help others.
Yes. Coming up with a purpose.
Yeah.
And it can be something very, very simple, or it can be something very, very complex and huge. It doesn't matter. Just having that purpose, something that you can make a difference in someone else's life in honor or memory of your loved one that you've lost.
Describe when you were being prompted from your son
He was coming to me in various ways. It started out actually with we were at the tarmac waiting for his casket to come in, and it was pouring down rain. I mean, just thunder, lightning, and we were even wondering whether the plane was going to be able to land. And then we were talking about how sorry we felt for the men in uniform that
The
were going
soldiers that have to receive.
Yeah, and the JROTC that
Yeah.
were going to be out there standing in formation in this pouring rain.
Was that locally?
And it was in Tennessee.
In Tennessee.
And he, the plane landed, and it was almost like God said, okay, we're going to stop the crying. And I mean, it just immediately stopped raining, just as they were ready to pull the casket off the plane.
Yeah.
And so they were able to pull the casket off and take it to the hearse. And they allowed people to go up and say their goodbyes to the hearse, the casket. And almost on cue, the rain started. And I was like one of the last, his father and I were one of the last ones to be able to go up there and say our goodbyes. And
So it was just enough time.
Just enough time
to get it done.
And then all of a sudden, we just heard this thunder, boom, boom, boom. And people said, it sounds like God's giving his salute. And then again, it started just pouring down rain. And it was just, everybody was just in awe that happened, that timed so perfectly. And then there were a few other things that happened, and I got the feeling he was trying to come to me. And then on the way home, driving his car back to Florida, I would get fixated on a thought like, were you in any pain? And all of a sudden, I would look up and there would be a billboard, and it's like, pain-free. And then it was like, well, is it as beautiful in heaven as everybody says? And I'd be fixated on that. And all of a sudden I'd look up and it's beautiful here. And this kept happening over and over. And I just thought, wow, that's really odd that every time I look up, there's a billboard that's answering my question. And finally I said, are you really trying to talk to me through billboards? And I look up, it's like, can you hear me now? And
that's
like,
just,
that's
incredible.
Yeah, it really was. It really was. And then because of all of that, I noticed that I was on empty, and I had no idea how long I had been on empty. And so my mother was in the car with me, and I said, we've got to find the next exit. And so we pulled off, and just as we were pulling into the gas station, we were out of gas. We coasted to the gas station pump.
I've done that before.
And we filled up. But I went into this gas station, and it was like the only one there. There was no other gas stations, no stores, no nothing. There was a thick layer of dust on everything in the store. And I found it odd that there were these black velvet pillows that somebody had cross-stitched these sayings, things like, I am here with you always. And but there was no dust on them. There was no dust on these pillows. I wish I would have bought one just to even prove to me sometimes, because I think that is so weird. I almost wonder if that gas station really did exist. Yeah, I mean, it was just so...
Just surreal.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's quite a experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so those things kept continuing to happen. But then what really started everything was, as a life coach, I knew I needed to get some grief support help. So I had made an appointment to go to a counselor. And on my way there, I turned the wrong way. And as soon as I made that wrong turn, I knew I'd made the wrong turn. But there was this beautiful boat up for sale alongside the road. And I had that fleeting thought, what a cool boat. It was a deck boat. So my son and I got certified as scuba divers when he was 13 and recertified when he was 16. So it was the type of boat you could have scubaed off of, snorkeled off of, fished off of. I mean, all the things we love to do.
That was your passion.
Yeah. And that night he came to me in a dream and he wanted me to buy the boat.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was one of those very vivid, real dreams in color where you hear their voice. And I got up the next morning and I told my mom about the dream, and we had a really good chuckle about me being a boat captain.
Yeah.
And didn't think anything more about it. But that night, had the dream again. And the next night again. And the next night again. And on the 5th night, I literally sat up in bed and said, son, please, please, please do not make me buy this boat. You know why we used to joke about them being called boats? Break out another 1,000.
That's right.
So got up the next morning and my mom asked if I had the dream. I said yes. And I had been diagnosed with PTS. And so if you don't get enough sleep, symptoms get worse.
Right.
So she recommended I call the doctor and see if I'll up my sleep meds. But at the same time, she said, why don't you go back to where that boat is? Sounds like the boat's way out of your price range. Maybe it'll be gone and it'll stop the dreams. Or if it's more than you can afford, it'll stop the dreams. And I was willing to do anything. As much as I love seeing my son, I wanted to get some sleep. So I drove back. The boat was there. No price tag, just a phone number. So I called. Guy answered, and I started asking a bunch of questions. And he finally interrupts me. He says, ma'am, have you ever owned a boat before? No. Are you calling for your husband? No. Getting divorced. Have you ever driven a boat before? No. You know they're expensive. Yes. Can you just, no. Does it run? And I'm asking him all these questions. And finally, he said, can I ask you why you're calling about this boat? And I'm sitting there going, what do I tell him? Oh, yeah, my dad's son's contacting me. He wants me to buy your boat. So I finally just said, you know, it's a little complicated. Just answer me one more question. How much do you want for the boat? And he said $7,000. And I went, thank you very much, out of my price range, because I only had about $2,500 I could have spent on a boat. And so I started to hang up and I could hear him say, lady, wait. And I said, yes. And he goes, you never told me why you wanted the boat. And I thought, and I like, okay. At the time, my cell phone was a 727 area code and I was standing in 813. So I figured I could ditch the phone and tell the police that it'd gotten stolen because I didn't want to be hauled off in the straitjacket.
Yeah.
So I said, okay. Here's the reason I'm calling. And I told him, and he goes, lady, I'm a veteran. If that's why you want the boat, I'll sell it to you trailer and all for $2,000.
Wow.
So next day, I left with the boat, and that's what started me on this journey to now have a retreat center with 4 acres and 2 boats and about 10 kayaks and a bunch of programs, including a dog program that we do, and Operation Solid 7, which is mental health and well-being. And so
that story just blows my mind. You know, that experience is just incredible.
Yeah.
It's just an amazing thing. And to know that veteran on the other side was like, I'll sell this boat if it means something to somebody.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome too.
Yeah.
Because that's what life is about, right?
Yes.
Doing meaningful things that fulfill you.
Yes.
You know, when did you know that you like a retreat center was a good idea?
Well, after doing the boating trips
so you started with some boating trips.
Just boating trips, just taking them out.
Taking veterans out.
Yeah. And actually the very first one that we did was in November. We bought the boat in October. And well, I bought the boat in October, and then in November, I had a friend that worked on it, tuned it up and everything. And I did my first boating trip. He taught me how to drive it. So I did my first boating trip in November with several Vietnam veterans. And right after we got done and everybody was saying their goodbyes, a great big guy came up to me and gave me a bear hug. And I could feel him start to shudder. And I knew he was going to start crying. I said, please, please, please don't cry, because you'll have me in a puddle here. And he goes, no, you don't understand. This was wonderful. This is the best thing that's happened to me. He said, actually, this is the first time since I got back from Vietnam that I truly felt somebody cared about my service and sacrifice. And he just kept going on and on how this boating trip was just so healing for him and everything. And then finally he goes, but you got one problem. And I'm like, okay. I mean, you just told me everything's wonderful. What's the problem? He goes, you're going to need a bigger boat.
That's great.
So I just laughed because I mean, I really, I didn't see it. But in doing the boating trips for about 10 months, I started realizing that some of them I was taking out really needed more than just a day out on the water. And so I came back one day from a trip and started putting in keyword searches in the computer to try to find a program that would be specific for veterans to help with grief.
Mm-hmm.
And could not find anything. And it's not just the loss of brothers in arms, but it's life losses that they go through. We were kind of talking about that a little earlier.
Yeah.
And I could not find anything. And I happened to call a lady out in Seattle, Washington, Darcy Sims. She's since passed, but she was to the grief world what like the Beatles or the Rolling Stones were to rock and roll. I mean, she's the person you call. And she was tied in with the military. So I called and I said, I don't know if you remember me, but I'm the lady that is doing the boating trips in Florida. And she's like, oh, yeah, I remember you. And she said, what can I do for you? And I need to know the name of a program that I can refer these veterans to that are struggling. And she said,
that need more than this boat ride.
Just a boat ride,
Yeah.
yeah. And she said, there isn't any. And then she said, so what are you going to do about it?
Wow.
And I was like,
She knew you were going to. That's amazing.
I hung up the phone. I actually, as I hung up the phone, the TV was on and the news broke about 2 more being killed. And I just broke down and started bawling because it had only not even been a year yet since the death of my son. So I was still trying to process everything and jumped on the boat and went out to a place called Beer Can Island.
Yeah.
And my son and I used to love looking for shark's teeth there. And I'm walking around this island just sobbing, talking to God, talking to Corey. And, I get the feeling you want me to do a program, but I don't know. I
don't know where to start.
Don't know where to start. Don't have the money. Don't have the education because I was not a grief support provider at that time. Although I was a life coach and I had, the real world experience of grief, I was not a certified grief support provider. So, I'm just trying to figure it all out. And I finally said, if this is what you want me to do, I'll do it. But I need a sign. And I'm not talking a nice shark's tooth or a pretty shell. I'm talking a burning bush sign here. Okay. And I took 2 more steps and this wave washes up over my feet and deposits a 3-inch bullet right at my feet. Yeah.
Well, that's not common.
No. And
the chances of that happening are very slim.
Yeah, but it gets better.
Yeah, but that's okay.
It gets better.
But there's more. Wait, there's
more. So I go back home and I'm showing my mom the bullet. And she's like, do you think this is safe to handle? Because it's been rolling around in salt water. And how does a bullet that's heavy, why is it not at the, no, I don't know. But so let me take it down to my Vietnam friend that I'd taken out on a boat trip that lived just 2 blocks down. So I took it to him and he goes, it's safe, but just give it to me. I'll get the gunpowder out. Come back tomorrow. I'll have it put back together for you. So I go back the next day and he goes, didn't you tell me your son was a Vietnam history buff? And I said, yeah, Vietnam and World War II, but mainly Vietnam. He said, you know how you thought this was your burning bush sign? I said, yeah. He said, this bullet was made for a U.S. sniper's rifle in Vietnam. And it is not a current bullet. And then he said, so do you see the little dimple on the bottom of the shell casing? I said, yeah. He said, this bullet has been misfired. And then he explained what a misfire was. And he said, so for this bullet that was only used during Vietnam in a U.S. sniper's rifle that has been misfired to roll up at your feet, because, lady, you got yourself one hell of a burning bush. Don't know what you're going to do with it, but you got your burning bush.
Wow.
So.
I feel like I got to keep putting my jaw up when I'm listening to you, because it's just so amazing.
Yeah. So that has been, it's been a lot of hard work, but it's been a lot of labor of love. And it's just been one thing after another, and I think the thing that I've learned the most from this is bad things sometimes have to happen so something good can come out of it. And that helps me to get through.
I agree with that. Sometimes the bad thing that you're going through isn't even for you.
No.
It's for someone else.
Yes.
And I know that sounds crazy, and I don't ever want to diminish what people are going through.
Mm-hmm.
But even sometimes your cancer is for your children. And I know it sounds crazy, or to bring back a loved one to heal something else. And these tragedies, if there's always something that comes from it in a positive way, and as a firefighter, I've seen it.
Yeah.
Many, many, many times I've experienced it.
We're one of the lucky ones that get to see it, because a lot of people don't get to see it.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that pebble when you throw it across and it makes those ripple effects. You don't always get to see the ripples beyond what is just close by.
Yeah. Yeah. As a person that's went through these things, I recognize them in other people, and I'm drawn to people that have gone through trauma and grief, because while I keep saying I'm not a therapist, I'm not a psychiatrist, but you mentioned it's the experience. The experience is sometimes way more valuable than certificates. And there's been many times where I just know God has put me here to talk to this one person because I've got something to offer, to listen, to be able to unpack for them, to be able to help them heal even just a little bit from what they went through, and I think that's how one of the ways that my trauma that I went through created growth.
Yes.
As opposed to, not, as opposed to really making it affect my life in a negative way.
Yeah.
Because I knew, some of the circumstances, and you're a really good person to talk to about this, because you've seen signs from your son. I mean, I don't share it too often, but when I was a firefighter, I would know when someone is passing over the bridge into heaven. And I would know it was happening. I would know that it's going to happen. And I would know that there was something they needed to hear. And I would be able to say it. And countless times, whether or not was someone in the hospital, that we had an experience where I was in a hospital with someone I know. Their grandma was passing away, and they'd only met me a handful of times, a couple of times. I wasn't very important part of their life, and it was actually my son's mother, my son Riley, my ex-wife, and she, her grandmother was passing away, and she had a sister named Tanya, and her dad went in and was talking to a grandmother that was passing, and she came out. He goes, "She wants to talk to Tony." And we all looking like, "Tanya?" Like, "No, she asked for Tony." And we're all looking at each other like, "Why? That is just not normal." And I went in, of course, and, I held her hand, and I looked at her, and I realized I knew exactly why I was there. And she was scared. She was scared, and somehow I was going to provide her with the words. And I said, are you afraid? And she said, yes. And I just said, listen, I said, you've done an amazing job with your family. Look at them. They're all here. Your son is going to provide. Like, you have done a great job raising them, and they know that you are tired, and you do not have to be afraid, because they're going to be okay. And you're going to be in a place that you're wrapped around with love. And I said, oh, are you okay? And she just looked at me and nodded and shook her head. Yes. I said, are you scared anymore? She goes, nope.
Yep.
I walked out, and it wasn't minutes later.
Yeah.
That it was the permission.
Yeah.
And but again, who am I in that situation except for a conduit of, so we'd be in a rescue, and I would just know that someone needed to be touched on the shoulder.
Yeah.
I would just know, I held the girl's 17-year-old girl's hand till she died crying for her mommy, and people look at you and they go, well, how can you be okay now? Who else would have done it? There is a lot of people in these professions that have compassion fatigue, and maybe they're not the person that can provide that kind of care. They're great at what they do. They're great medics, and they're great caregivers of acute injuries, but not that human element that people need. And because I was there and holding her hand, and I had to call her mother and tell her, because we couldn't fly her, I had to call her mother and tell her that you needed to meet us at the hospital as soon as possible, and you need to have someone else drive you. And that's just not a normal thing for me to have to do. And maybe somebody else wouldn't have done it. And I tried to get her there before she passed. But by the time we got to the hospital, I kept holding her name, and she was crying for her mommy, or I kept holding her hand while she was crying for mom, and she passed. But the family knew that she had someone there that was their family stand-in.
That's so true. I think that's also true for the military. When I was told of Corey's passing, my first thought was, oh my God, he died in this God-forsaken country with no family.
Yeah.
But when I talk to those he served with that were there, and I see the tears in their eyes, he had family.
Yeah.
And that's what you're talking about. You were her family there. Yep. She had family with her. And I think that's one thing that law enforcement and firefighters and our military, they have that bond, and they can step in and be their family. And
because you can put yourself in that parent's shoes, what's happening. And again, people ask, well, how could you do it? Who else would have done it?
Yeah.
I was the right person for the job, and that makes you really, I think a lot of these things that we go through, if people can reframe them by saying, well, okay, I recently talked to someone who experienced one of my friends falling from a tree, and it was traumatic for them to watch this and to go help. He's never done this kind of thing before, and all of a sudden he's thrust into this position to try to help someone, during an emergency, and he had sleepless nights after this. He couldn't go to sleep, and I know that it was actually, his name is Woody. There's articles about him because it was Greg Stubbe, Congressman Greg Stubbe, that fell from the tree. And if you've ever seen, he was an Amazon driver in our neighborhood, and we bonded together, and we talked about, I just knew that there was something I had to be able to help him with. And I just said, well, what happened? Walk me through it. Well, clearly you were the only person for the job. Yeah. Clearly that was your duty. You did it and you fulfilled it. Who else could have done what you did? Right. And, all that second guessing goes away from them. And honestly, he was able to sleep better after that. And it's just a matter of I don't want to minimize anyone's trauma, because there's some things that just need a lot more than a conversation.
Oh, yes.
Right?
Yes.
But there's also some things that if you can just reframe your mind on, that you can get past. So,
yeah, if you can view them in a different way, have a different take on it, so that you can, sometimes people tend to lock onto something and they can't lock off of it, and they don't look at it in any other perspective.
Yeah.
But when they look at it in a different perspective, then they can accept it.
Yeah. It can be the why me.
Yeah.
Why did this happen?
Right.
Why did I see this?
Exactly.
Why not you?
Why not you? Exactly.
Right. Yeah. So I just wanted to share that with you, because this is the type of thing that's put me on this path for this podcast too, because I just know people are hurting out there, and I just know that people feel alone. And I just never, if there's just one person that is watching this that just feels alone, you're just not alone.
Yes.
There are people here that will reach out to you and help you, and gladly, with open arms, accept you for whatever it is that you're doing or are, and why you have what you're doing, and why you're doing what you're doing is essentially that, you know? So one of the things we talked about before we had a really good session before we even started the podcast. I'm like, we got to stop talking. We got to make this happen. I talked about this with my last podcast guest too, but it being an institution, the military, you experience trauma when you lose somebody, when you get shot, when you see something terrible. Those are the obvious traumas. Yes. They happen.
Right.
They're very apparent. And then you experience the compassion fatigue for caring about those things, right? And we know that that's a truth. But there's also the institution that just rolls past you after your dedicated time. And when you're separated from that, I wanted you to talk about that, because it just makes so much sense, whether you're fire, police, or
doesn't
military.
Matter. Yeah, it doesn't matter. Those are professions where you wear a uniform every day. That's your identity.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden, you're no longer that firefighter or that military or that law enforcement officer, and you're not putting that uniform on anymore. So that loss of identity is even stronger and harder for that person that's worn the uniform. Also, they built this family in the military, in law enforcement, in firefighter. I mean,
you lived with them. You live with them. You spend so much time with them.
Their smells.
Right. You know their eating habits, or their sleeping
their good
habits,
days
or
and
what
their
they
bad
like
days,
on TV,
and all that stuff. Yeah, and so now you're no longer. You've lost what I call bond family.
Yeah.
Okay, and I think our culture is really bad about teaching that family's only by blood. And I think the military and law enforcement and firefighters have it so right. They teach you that that your family's who's got your back, who's there beside you every day in the trenches with you. But when you leave your profession, you're thrust back into the society that believes that family's only by blood.
Right.
And so one of the things we talk about is building your bond family. Who is your bond family? And building that bond family outside of the law enforcement, firefighter, or military. And that doesn't mean that you can't have people that you served with in your bond family.
Sure.
But rebuilding that bond family is very, very important. And then also, those professions also have a built-in purpose. And
it's bigger than you.
Yeah. Oh,
right?
Much bigger. Yeah.
You're wearing a uniform. It's bigger than you.
Yes. And so it's harder when you get out if you don't find your new purpose.
Yeah.
The problem with these is they're intangibles. The identity is an intangible. The purpose is an intangible. And so you're not really told oh, by the way, here's your retirement. Thank you very much. Make sure you go out and find your purpose, another purpose. Make sure you find a new identity, all these things.
Right.
And so we call them life losses, and they're just as tragic as can be a death of a loved one, can be just as stifling. Just one of them by themselves, but you're going through several all at the same time. And you've lost your job because you're no longer in the military or law enforcement, firefighter. And we talked about this. A lot of them don't stay where they lived, especially military.
Mm-hmm.
They move away, so they've lost their housing. So those are 5 major life losses right there. And that can be very devastating, very hard for somebody to overcome if they don't recognize that and start building that new identity of who they are now and their new purpose. Those things.
I've been being shown several different things, right? I mean, like, why am I going to start a podcast, right? Who are you? And I feel like I was very called to do this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like it's setting the world on fire, making me money. That's not what this is designed to do. It's designed to reach that one person.
Yes.
You write that calling to help somebody, because that is what I've done all my life.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I need to do for people. And at the same time, I just know that I stepped my foot out in faith to go do it.
Mm-hmm.
And while I'm doing this, I'm waiting and paying attention to where I need to say yes and where the avenues are, because one of the things that's really revealed itself to me is just what we talked about. And there is no organization or plan or even a thought process in most of these institutions that say, we got to prepare for when they're ready to go.
Mm-hmm.
We got to prepare them for when they leave.
Mm-hmm.
They don't. They're just gone. They're forgotten about. The institution rolled past, and you've had all these tragic losses. I was in Washington, D.C., and I was talking to some of the guys at the D.C. Fire Department, and we talked about being in a retired,
Mm-hmm.
and they have 4 shifts. A lot of fire departments have 3, but they have 72 hours because they're just so busy. So they have 4 shifts. They have A, B, C, and D shift, where most people have an A, B, C shift in a fire department. But he said, oh yeah, E shift. And I'm like, what? He goes, yeah, all the retired guys, we call that E shift. It was the first time I'd ever really heard a fire department say, we actually acknowledge that these people exist still.
Right.
We have them over.
Yeah.
We take care of them
Right.
still. We include them in things. They are E shift.
Right.
And I'm like, oh my gosh, why don't institutions recognize? And then what's the next step? How do we help with that? Because that is something that really needs to be instituted in fire departments, because I experienced it when I left. 6 months, identity crisis.
Yeah.
I'm totally doing something different. We'd moved houses, right? And bang, I'm sitting there awake, having a panic attack, wondering if I'm having a heart attack and wondering what the heck is this from?
Right.
And I totally realized it was just that identity crisis, anxiety that I'd never had before.
Yeah.
And I recently talked to another guy who retired. He's experiencing the same thing.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that we were connected, because it just brought more light into that. I've got one retired guy who tries to keep us getting together for lunches.
Mm-hmm.
And it's great, but a lot of guys have moved away and it's not happening.
Yeah.
But it's not the fire department doing it. It's a couple of guys, and it really should be the institution that used you up.
Yeah.
Right? That utilized your services that you gave.
Right.
That keeps doing it, because it's more meaningful,
Or at least have them be involved in some way.
Yeah.
They don't have to be starting it. But we're starting to see more groups, firefighting groups meet, gather once a week or once a month. Same with veterans. You see Bob's Vets out there. That's starting to take off. I think you're going to start seeing more and more as people become more aware that, we need to still build that bond family, and this is a way of doing it.
Yeah, I was just at a public safety breakfast for both on duty and off duty, and it's a Christian driven thing for ministry,
Right.
to make sure they know that we're thinking about them, and it's for retirees, for active, for everybody. And I also I love the name of this organization, but I'm a trustee at a local Suncoast Fools chapter. Fools, Fraternal Order of Leatherhead Society, right? And we've been a little bit, we've not, since COVID really devastated some of these things. And and today's firefighter, not all of them are doing this because it's a calling. It really got, it was made popular by 9/11. It was made popular by backdraft.
Right.
And people chase something that maybe not is their calling.
Right.
And it's to a lot of people, it's becoming, hey, as soon as I'm out of here, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
So things have changed too. And I can imagine that's in all of the, uniform services, So, and another thing we talked about, and you said, hey, the military often move away, but as a firefighter or a police officer.
Yeah, that the police officer and the firefighter, when they're working, they a lot of times are going past the trauma because they're still working that same beat. So they may go by the house where the child drowned and they weren't able to save them, or where that car wreck was and they weren't able to save someone. And so they're constantly reminded of that tragedy on a daily or weekly basis. Whereas in the military, that's not as much so, unless it was, say, a training accident where they're going back there. Because a lot of times, they're there for a year, then they're coming back, and then usually they're not sent back to the exact same place. They're sent somewhere else. So that's a difference in the two.
That geographical memory is real.
Oh, yeah.
It's real. And I can tell you.
It's a sight, it's sound, it's smell.
That's why I don't live in Venice.
Yeah. Right? Those three. Yeah.
I served in Venice, and my family, when we're driving through Venice, it's like, oh, this happened here, this happened here, this happened here, this happened here. And it's, they just know that when we're going to drive to Venice, that I'm going to be talking about everything that happened, because it pops up, and it's just like you were right there.
Yeah.
It's just like, you remember it clear as day. You can see the picture. Yeah.
Might as well be watching a movie because it's in color and big.
So, and it's kind of funny why I didn't realize why I lived so far out in the country now, right? And stay away from those areas. I mean, and it's not because, you just don't need to be remembered, or you don't need to be reminded of it all the time, So, so your retreat, I know that you are in.
Currently, we're in Ruskin.
Ruskin, and you have purchased some property?
Yes, in Punta Gorda. We're going to be moving our retreat to Punta Gorda. So our Ruskin property of 4 acres is up for sale, and we've already purchased 12 acres, so 3 times the size. So we keep growing. I'm hoping this is kind of it. But so we're going to be building.
That's a lot of acres. That's good.
Yeah. It's going to be fun watching the new construction happen, and it I know in my mind what I want it to look like, and I can't wait to see once it's done.
If someone wanted to help you, what kind of help could you use right now?
Right now, we're looking for volunteers in both locations. If you are handy with tools, heavy equipment, in fact, tomorrow, we're going to be down there putting in 9 flagpoles and 14 fence posts. And so, we can always use people with skills. Do
you have that need posted out there, like, consistently? Do you put it on social for like a call to action for some of these things?
Not very often. Typically, I have people that will call me and say, hey, I want to get a group together. And like, that's what happened here. We've put it out there that we needed to get the flagpoles put in. And I had somebody call me and say, hey, I've got a group of us can you meet us out there? And we're happy to, it's only an hour and a half between Ruskin and.
I'd love to be informed on those,
Sure.
so that I can either maybe our self-help or at least just spread the word. So there's plenty of people that I know would love to help. So what are the services that you offer? How do you help people? What is your claim to, fame when you're operating this?
We do the boating program still.
Okay.
And just being in nature sometimes
it's like just a break, isn't it?
Yes.
It's
just getting away, whatever that is, or communing with nature and seeing. Even just the new property is a private lake. It's stocked with fish and turtles, and people love to feed them. I mean, they just come swimming right up to you. We have Operation Solid 7, which is our mental health and well-being. We actually do 3-day, 3-night workshops where we bring in the veterans or the firefighters, law enforcement. Sometimes it's couples. We put them through a 3-day, 3-night program to help them understand the life losses they've gone through, help them see sometimes when they're getting locked onto something and how to maybe try to look at it in a different manner. We do love languages, personality styles, communication styles, and also let them try different holistic modalities, breath work, yoga, hypnotherapy, those kinds of things, to see if any of that resonates with them. And if so, then we can help them get more of that afterwards, get them plugged in. We also do my service dog's place. And it came to our attention because of my Warrior's Place that a lot of times the service dog was taken to the pound if the veteran owner was put in the VA in an emergency situation and had no family or friends that could take their dog. So we now house those dogs. If it's a retired law enforcement firefighter with a service dog, or a veteran with a service dog, or a Gold Star family, and they have a medical emergency and don't have someone that can watch the dog, we will watch the dog for them.
So temporary care. Do you have any long-term dog residents?
Not long-term. We do. It's all while they're getting the medical treatment they need. Now, that could be up to 9 months.
Sure.
It could be a 3-month, or most of them are usually 30 days or less. But on rare occasions. And we have some that come back, where we've got he just turned 39, and he has severe internal injuries and has had to have a heart valve transplant, and every once in a while has to go back in the hospital for something. And so we take in his service dog when he goes.
That's awesome. That's not it's amazing, because there are so many things that you don't know, like as just someone that is going about life,
right, that
someone might require.
Right.
And to be able to fill in that gap,
that's
just one I haven't heard of until, with you guys, which I thought it was just so amazing.
Well, you just assume that it's a service dog, so it would be allowed in the hospital, or it would be allowed.
Clearly, somebody's
taking care of it. It was only because of my Warrior's Place where I was getting phone calls from the VA, and they would say, "We have a veteran here, and he knows you." They couldn't tell me why he was there, but that he has his dog, and I would go, "Oh yeah, I know who you're talking about," and they would like, "Well, he wants to know if you can go get his dog out of the pound because the community pet resource, because he has no one to do that." And the first couple times it happened, I thought, well, this is really weird. And I thought, why don't they have family or friends? But then I got to investigating it. And it's like, how many people live in an HOA where they have dog breed restrictions?
Right.
Or they're already at their capacity.
Especially dog breed restrictions, I imagine, is the largest one.
Yeah. And a lot of them, big dogs are not allowed. Mm. And it's not their service dog, so they can't get around that it's a service dog angle. Or their family is out of town, they don't have family here, or maybe their friends, due to whatever, can't take them.
Kids, it might have,
you don't know. Yeah. And so
I'm sure you have to consider the disposition of the dog, whether they do well with families or they don't.
And then the other thing, too, you've got to consider is that service the dog provides. You don't want it where it could somebody could do something to discount or cause that service to be diminished.
So when you have them, you're working them.
We're,
or what is it that you do to maybe...
We're protecting the service. We're making sure that we're not doing anything. That's one thing
retraining them in some other way.
We're not retraining them. We're not doing that at all. All we're doing is we will make sure to find out what service does that dog do for you. And then we make sure that we don't do anything that's going to interfere with that service.
Yeah. Well, so that's something that I wouldn't have thought about. I'm sure many people wouldn't have thought about that. Yeah. That's a great service to people. Yeah. I did see that it's just, when I watched the video, which is a great video, and we'll play it at the end of this. I'm going to have it attached to the end of our podcast. And I love it because I know Max Shoe Productions created it.
Yes.
And this is where we're in the podcast. I always love to give them a shout out because they're great. It just felt like a place people can come unplug and get away from what is the hustle of life and have some time to just think and unwind or not think.
Right. And they don't have to have a reservation. I mean, we've had people show up at 10, 11, 12 o'clock at night, and they just wanted to go out on the dock and sit.
Yeah.
Or fish. We have an underwater fish light so they can fish out there. But they do have to have a reservation to stay overnight in our cottages. They do have to have a reservation to take our boats out or to go out boating.
Got it.
But, we just need a 24-hour notice only because we need to have somebody there to show them where the life jackets are and where this is and where that is. And, if they're going to be going out on a boating trip where we need a licensed captain, we got to make sure we can get one, and because they're all volunteers that do this. So, it's,
if it's for free, do you need a licensed captain?
No, we don't. But for safety and for liability reasons,
you choose to
have a licensed captain.
No, and it's smart. It's smart. I mean, I was a captain of the fire boat, and I let mine go, and I've been thinking about getting it back. Just because it's a nice certificate to have.
Now we do charge if they stay overnight in the cottages because we have cleaning we have to do. We have water, electricity that's being used, and wear and tear, and all that stuff. But what they would pay to stay there versus a hotel room. I mean, $55 a night for a 1-bedroom, 1-bath, completely furnished kitchen, living room, dining room, Yeah,
it's nothing. It's paying to clean up.
And it's considered a donation. We just say minimum donation amount, $55 a night.
Yeah.
You get a donation receipt.
Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you'd like to say before?
No, I hope, when we move down to Punta Gorda, we continue to get support down there. And, if anybody's looking to volunteer, they can contact us. We're always needing volunteers, not just people that come out onto the property and work, but, doing research, computer work. Tell me what you like to do and I'll get you doing.
We'll find something for you to do.
Yes.
I like that you're going to be closer. To us,
yes.
It's easier for me to resource people when you're closer, and spread the word. I enjoy connecting people to resources and knowing that somehow, I've found this amazing person and I found somebody that needs this amazing person, and boom, that makes me so happy to do, to connect people.
Yeah. And the one nice thing I think about our programs is they work individually, but they also work all together. I mean, we've had people come out and actually use every single one of our programs.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what sets us apart from a lot of other nonprofits out there.
Right. Well, I want to thank you for coming on, and I'll make sure that, and in the information that they know how to get in contact with you, and we'll play your video as soon as we're done here. So if anyone's, watching this, stick around for a little bit, a really amazing video.
It is amazing
it's
video.
It's an amazing video.
Yeah. In fact, I've had people go, "You made me cry."
Oh.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you, the first time I saw it was with 45 other people, and I don't think there was a dry eye in the
Yeah.
house.
Yeah.
I mean, it was very impactful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Us softies, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's amazing. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
My Warriors Place is like the best kept secret in Ruskin, Florida.
We are a retreat for veterans, active duty, first responders, and families.
You can't help but love this place.
It's a place where we offer community.
Coming here with everything that's offered, there's like magic healing in this place.
I founded My Warriors Place after the death of my son when he was killed in Afghanistan in September of 2009. My son actually started contacting me in various ways right after he died, and he wanted me to take out veterans and active duty and families who had endured the loss of a fallen warrior to his favorite places where we used to go all the time. Started providing these boating trips, and I started noticing that some of the veterans I was taking out, we're talking over 50 years ago, that they had endured the death of a brother in arms. I set out to provide a program that would help them to deal with their losses, to become stronger and be able to handle the tragedies that took us on the journey to find property, which now is My Warriors Place.
This place, I told you, it draws you in. And then just walking around here, I mean, it's so relaxing.
All the other details, dog tags, all of the stones, the monuments, the waterfalls, it hits you.
We have 5 amazing programs. One of them is the retreat center itself, where they can come, stay up to 2 weeks, and it's more than a hotel room. I mean, it's a fully furnished 1-bedroom, 1-bath cottage with a full kitchen, dining room. For those that come 2 weeks or less, they're generally here just on vacation, just as a getaway. And this is kind of like their weekly family healing time.
When I first joined My Warriors Place, I started teaching the Forever a Warrior retreat so that they can learn a little bit about themselves, about communication styles, self-care, and being able to take that back home with them.
It's hard to describe the healingness of this place, it really is. You walk in and it's not just the memorials, it's like a feeling. I had been crying every day. I was just told I had 6 months to live. And I came down here and it made me feel so good, I came right back.
We also offer Project Corregidor, which is our grief program. We talk to them about the loss and the tragedies they've gone through, help them kind of rethink how they view things.
Just the ability to share the challenge brought some peace and calmness and brought some normal, which we fail to see a lot of times when we're going through stuff. We think it's just us. And I normally will not share, but at that moment when I was there in Project Corregidor, sitting with all my fellow veterans, I shared, and they just all opened up and they were all fully there.
The boating trips are fantastic because you just get to go out and just relax, just see nature. Most of the time when we've gone out, we've been with other Gold Star families. Going out and spending time with them and letting them talk about their sons or their daughters, it's healing for us to talk about it together.
It was relaxing, it was enjoyable, it was fun, we got to have a lot of laughs. It was just kind of an escape from things that were going on in our life.
And then we have Everyday Heroes USA, which is our catastrophic relief for our local heroes.
I went to my RV park, and when I pulled up, they had unplugged my RV and they said, take your stuff and get out. And I just kept thinking, I don't have anywhere to go. I don't have any friends where I can say, can I come spend the night? And Chad said, go to 101 22nd Street, Ruskin, Florida. And I came right here. And I pulled in and they took care of me and they got me a new battery in my truck. They housed me for like 30 days and it's just a wonderful place.
And then We have my service dog's place. Unfortunately, when American Hero with a service dog has to go into the hospital, that dog cannot go and stay in the hospital with them. These service dogs were being taken to the pound because there wasn't any place else to take them. So we now house those dogs for them so they can go get the treatment they need.
Rebel has been with me since he was 8 months old. He's highly trained. He knows hand signals. He knows verbal commands, he knows German, he knows everything. So I work with him on a daily basis. He's been with me through homelessness, everything. This time, when I had this emergency surgery and I went to the trials in San Antonio, the Warriors place and the service dog place, they just stepped in, no questions asked. Who does that for people? That's like the kindness it shows.
I've got a ton of just little exercises that keep them popping, keep them fun and having a good time without affecting their training. And that's what's great about this property for me personally, from a training perspective, is there's so much here.
My Warriors Place is a place of relaxation, it's a place of peace, it's a place where we can come and connect with God in quietness. It's a place of healing, it's a place to leave our grief behind and to be with other Gold Star families.
Come here and check this place out. Experience the peacefulness, the camaraderie, the patriotism. You got to come and experience yourself. When you stand in front of these flags, looking over the Little Manatee River and the Soldier's Cross that's sitting in front of it, and you'll realize what this place stands for.
We have helped to date over 50,000. It's hard to believe that we can touch that many lives. Right now, we're 100% volunteer run.
There's so much work that needs to be done. Your volunteering, your donations would be a blessing.
Our dog program is needed everywhere. Our retreat center is needed everywhere, but we don't have the resources yet to be able to expand.
And those big plans can't happen unless we do have volunteers and generous donors.
The best way to contact us is through our website, which is www.mywarriorsplace.org. Go to our Facebook page, My Warriors Place, and like us. Support an American Hero today by making a donation. Your donation will make a positive difference.